Hello folks, I built an all-in-one workbench from scratch, which includes several essential tools and features for woodworking and DIY projects. Today I'll be sharing how it works, what it can do, some background for how I built it, and what I would do differently if I were to start over and build it again. I hope this video is helpful if you're looking for ideas for how to build your own workbench. Let's get to it. We'll start by popping the hood to see what's inside. I'll show you how all of these tools are used in a minute. I have a router, a jigsaw, a planer, and a circular saw, all mounted to the underbelly of the workbench surface. There's a large cavity on the inside with foam, which helps with sound dampening, space for sawdust to collect, and storage for saw blades and router bits. If I need to adjust any of the tools, change out a blade or bit, I have access to do so when the bench top is open. Each of these power tools is permanently switched on the tool itself. I use zip ties for those with a trigger to secure them in the on position. The power cords for each of the tools run down through a small hole on the inside of the bench and connect to a switchboard, easily accessible from the front of the bench. Each tool can be turned on individually with this switchboard, like so. I built a few other accessories to make the tools on the workbench more accurate and versatile. I made a sled to use with the DIY table saw, which can be easily adjusted to make angle cuts. I routed the track for this sled directly into the plywood tabletop. I also made a fence for ripping longer table saw cuts. Once it's in the desired location relative to the blade, a simple lever locks it in place using pressure against the tabletop. There's plenty of storage on the sides of the bench and underneath. It's helpful to give a specific home to many of the other hand tools, clamps, and materials I use regularly. I put the frame on casters so I can move it around whenever I need to, and I also installed T-tracks into the bench top, which are sometimes helpful for clamping down large pieces to the work surface. I don't use these T-tracks as much as I initially anticipated. Here's a closer look at the work surface components and an attention-seeking spider who wanted some camera time. Now for some brief footage of each of these tools being used during actual projects. I didn't really capture footage at the time I was building this workbench, but I do have a few pictures to give you an idea of how this whole thing came together. I don't have build plans to share since I didn't even draft up plans myself. I mostly just threw this thing together as I went along. This is in the middle of building the work surface. Notice that this is not the final iteration of the table saw. Mounting the bottom plate of the circular saw flush to the work surface seemed like a major safety hazard. There was just too much blade exposure. So I mounted both the router and circular saw using the same approach. A hole was cut out of the surface. I routed a little landing into the surface deep enough for a thin piece of plywood to sit in, which the tool would be attached to from below. Here's a proof of concept of the table saw mounting from the bottom to help illustrate. This is the underbelly of the surface during the build. Notice the router attached like I just mentioned. It's mounted to the thin plywood. The plywood then rests on the landing spot from above, and then the plywood is attached to the tabletop using small screws from below. Here's the bench top as I was working on installing the switches to the front. And this is the finished state of the router after being attached. This is the finished product, fully loaded with all my tools. Overall, I love how it looks, and more importantly, how much utility is packed into such a small amount of space. So what would I do differently if I were to start this over from scratch again? My number one complaint about using this is that whenever I need to change out a blade, bit, or adjust the depth of one of the tools, I need to stop my momentum, clear off the entire surface so I can lift up the bench top. If I could build this again, I might try to split the top surface into two pieces right around here. Why? I would fix all of my power tools to one surface that can pop up when adjustment is needed, and I'd have a portion of the top fixed permanently closed so I could place any hand tools or workpieces on that surface instead of having to take everything off and put it on the ground when I need to lift up the bench top. This slows me down quite a bit and is regularly frustrating. Number 2, I've found it pretty difficult to align the table saw fence perfectly parallel with the blade. This can result in occasional pinching and kickback when ripping cuts on the table saw, which can be pretty dangerous. I don't know the best answer to solving this problem. Leave me a note in the comments if you have any ideas. Number 3, I rarely use the mounted jigsaw as a scroll saw. Without it being supported by some housing from above the surface, the blade bends too much horizontally as I move work pieces for it to be practical. Next time, I would either build housing above the surface to keep the blade steady or leave this tool out completely. And last but not least, this thing is a beast and can't exactly fit through a doorway. I did not build the workbench in a way that can be easily taken apart, meaning I'm limited to keeping it in the garage. I love the top surface size from a usability perspective, but next time I might try to design this bench to be just skinny enough to fit through a door. And that is all I have for you today, folks. I hope this video helps you if you're trying to build your own workbench. Leave me a note in the comments if you have any thoughts, feedback, or ideas for how I can improve these videos. Good luck with your projects, and subscribe if you'd like to see more DIY-focused content. Have a great day.